software automation in a polyglot stack. I'm wondering if there's anyone here who is working on or wanting to introduce a new language into their programming stack at work. Excellent. Is there anyone here who is suffering from the introduction of more programming languages at work? There's a fair amount of overlap in that group, so that's optimistic. Yes, that is totally a thing, and I have programmed in many languages, and at the moment I'm in a state of, oh my God, can I just use one? Because I'm tired of looking up how to do string concatenation every time I switch. So for this talk, I decided that since it's about polyglot, I would do a polyglot session. And so I wrote 7 little micro sessions in different presentation mediums and tools. And I figured if there's pain in switching between them, that will make a point. So also, like programming, I thought they would be 7 5-minute sessions, and then I wrote them, and then I talked through them, and I know I have 7 15-minute sessions. So I reordered them, and we're probably going to get through 3. This is fine. So since I had to move the interesting theory-based ones to the back, I need you to accept a couple assumptions and just trust that I have discussions about this, and you can access this GitHub organization that contains the micro sessions anytime you like. But first of all, I want to assert that our objective as software developers is not to write code. It is to operate useful software. So it has to be running, and it has to be useful, and it has to continue to be useful, which means we need to change it almost continuously. Our job is, again, not to write code. Our job consists mostly of exploring. As we change these systems, we learn from them, and those two things are very entwined in a complex system. You can't learn without changing it, really, and you can't change it without learning about it, that's for sure. So our job is mostly exploring and discovery, because we might know where we're trying to get, but the path from here to there, we've got to figure it out. And finally, a team is defined as everyone who is required for you to succeed at operating useful software, regardless of what the org chart says. So that involves people, it involves the software itself. Lord knows the particular code we work on has a big influence on our day. And it involves the tools that we use, because so far we have not invented Tron, so we can't just dive into the computer and start manipulating the software that we're trying to run. No, we have to use other software to put things on screens and give us buttons and accept commands to be able to observe and control the system that we're operating. All right, so the first mini talk is about why we might choose to do polyglot programming. I mean, not that you can really avoid it. I mean, everybody uses something and JavaScript, right? I've found that to be pretty universal. Unless you use JavaScript and JavaScript, but yeah, there's a lot of reasons for polyglot programming, and here are some of them. And this one is in the medium of paper 53 on the iPad with the Apple Pencil. So my favorite reason to introduce a new programming language is in order to add automation to my stack. So as an example, at Atomist, we wanted pretty documentation. And the most direct route that we could find to pretty documentation that we could change reasonably easily was this MakeDocs tool, which happens to be in Ruby. And then we run tests on it with HTML-Proofer, which is in Python. And neither of those are languages that we otherwise use at Atomist. But this was the fastest path to just get some docs up there so that here we've got my goal of pretty documentation, my sub-goal of using MakeDocs, and my action, my little team in the boat there, is to install Ruby. More in a few minutes about how I made this a little less painful. So that's a great reason to automate. But the more popular, the makes a better conference talk reason to automate, is to fit the language to the problem. So we want to be like, oh, we want to use a language that's perfectly suited to the problem. My friend Avdi did an experiment on this where he had some tool he needed to write, and it was some data transformation tool, and he made a point of using the most fitted language to the particular tiny transformation he was doing, among like awk and sed and other shell programs and Perl and Ruby. And he just took fitting the language to the problem down to an extreme, and he found it incredibly painful. Because the syntax is, of course, just a little different. I have this problem moving between Scala and TypeScript. It's just enough different to really hurt our heads. And since our tools are part of our team, and our software is part of our team, you've got to consider bringing in a new programming language as adding a team member. And adding a team member, they can be really difficult to fire. So think about that every time you use a language. But sometimes we really do have a problem that our language of, our most popular language at our company doesn't solve. Maybe you're a Java shop and you want to do some machine learning. You probably want to bring in Scala or Python. Maybe you need to do some embedded programming and it's time to bring in C. So I do think that fit the language to the problem has a place, but we need to be specific about what we mean in language and problem. Most especially at the moment, we don't program in languages. We program in language systems. And that includes how you build it, turn it into something useful, how you compose programs together with dependencies. That's a big deal. And how you would get on board with this language with tutorials and documentations. And then I think the real reason you're using this other language to fit your problem is because there are libraries and frameworks. Languages is like a platform. The library and framework are like apps. You want to get something done. So you're probably using Scala because you want to use Spark or Akka or something that's inside it. And that's good. These libraries, they come from a place. Specifically, they come from people. So when you think about fitting the language to a problem, think first about the language community. Because if you're doing machine learning and the community is doing machine learning, then they're going to keep up the libraries. The libraries are going to continue to advance. And they're going to answer questions on Stack Overflow. And they're the people writing the tutorials. So I think you really want to look for a language that is used by people who share your problem. But nobody shares your problem. Because while you can think of your problem, and we usually do, as the goal we're trying to reach, this machine learning system we're trying to build, the fact is that we exist in a space that is unique. No one else is in our organization with the team we have, with the existing set of legacy software and deployment environment and databases and data that we have. And we've got to chart a path. Chart is a strong word. We have to find a path from where we are to that goal. And that's that exploration process, that discovery process that is the core of our job, in my opinion. Right, so your problem is also unique, and you need to consider the people involved. And if the people don't know Scala, then that's a consideration. Who wants to learn it? Other times, we specifically want a new programming language for the people. But that's the next slide. But first, I want to show you this quote from Michael Feathers the other day on Twitter. You've got to think about where you're coming from, because the best designs come from paying attention to what is there. And he was not talking about legacy code this time. He was talking about this building by Frank Lloyd Wright. This is Falling Water, and how it fits into the landscape around it. Catherine said yesterday that mastery is about building with the grain. It's about understanding not just where you're going, but where you are, and finding the path that gets you there smoothly, not quickly, smoothly. That makes it sustainable. So about those people. Sometimes you want to introduce a new programming language in order to make people happier. And that's fine. That's fine. Here's this green person. He's like, there's more to life than Java. I need to experience the world. I want to bring in Elixir. All right, but then you got this blue guy over here who is like, that is not what I wanted to explore. He wants to work in the business domain, and he doesn't want to have to think and learn new languages and figure out how to do stuff in Elixir and Google how to do string concatenation. He just wants to work in the space he's already in. And then you've got even more people who are like, she's like, I'll use whatever lets me get work done. Come on, circle the whole thing. And so right now, that's going to be the language she already knows. But if you can make it super easy to get started in Elixir, she can be convinced. So you got to worry about the people who don't want to learn it. They have some pretty good reasons. And one of the things about switching to a new programming language, especially if you've been doing Java for 10 years and you know the libraries and you know the environment, and you know how it works and you can get stuff done, is you start to use something else and you feel really stupid. I feel stupid a lot, especially when it's a language that I used to know really well, and it's Scala or something, and now I can't remember how to do HTTP calls. And actually, even if I did remember, that library is deprecated by now anyway, and I need to find a new one. So there's a lot of feeling stupid involved, and so we need to make this as easy as possible. Yeah, people only have so much working memory, so much they can hold in their head at a time, and in order to explore the business domain, we need to be comfortable in our programming language system. But other times at work, we're exploring the software development domain, and that's also interesting. In fact, that can affect the kind of people in your organization in the future, because it's totally valid to think about not just the people who are there now, but the people who are going to be there. Because our programming language stack affects who's going to stay. It affects the people who's going to change, who's going to grow. This pink person in the middle is a good target for growth. And of course, who will join. No Red Ink was a JavaScript startup in San Francisco, like 1,000 other ones. And then they started using Elm, and suddenly they can hire like this, because everybody just wants to learn in Elm. And the people they're hiring are innovative people who want to work in a way that is moving the industry forward. So consider who will join your company. And that's a really good excuse to introduce a modern language, in my opinion, when really it's for us. But the problem is that you lose out on a lot of stuff, because this ship is Java, okay, and it's in an enterprise that's been using Java for a while, and it's armored, and it's got cannons and a really tacky sail. In order to defeat all the problems that the organization has encountered in the last 10 years. And you've got your Team City set up with build templates and parent templates and parent templates, and your POMs, your Maven POMs are doing the same thing, and you've got internal libraries or, God forbid, frameworks. And you have best practices for some description of best. I worked one place where they were super best of 2002. And it was a mess. But all these things exist for a reason. However, sometimes your enterprise Java stack, which was designed for maybe your internal business software, and it's solidly moving along for that, maybe you want to go someplace new. And maybe you need to go through a swamp. So your armor is someone else's baggage. But be careful, because your interesting is someone else's needless complexity. So it works both ways. In this case, what we really want is can I just use a kayak? I just need to get to that island and do a little bit of machine learning and check it out and see if it's useful. And all of this armor, this baggage is getting in my way. This, in my opinion, is the best reason to introduce a new language, because Catherine was saying yesterday in this room that degradation is a constant. As soon as you commit that code, it's getting older, it's getting out of date. And expiry, everything expires and becomes not useful. And that is an opportunity for renewal if we take it. So I think it's right to, in parallel to chugging along, discard our armor at some point and build new stuff. Because there's some of those same problems are gonna come up. Those constraints are real. And the baggage is a sign of success. But as we build our new armor, it'll be with More recent tools will be able to take advantage of things that are now commonplace in the industry that were novel 5 years ago, and we can stay with the current. So yes, we're going to build up baggage, but let's do that gradually and consciously. And when we think about how much baggage is helpful, well, if you're using Polyglot to automate for that first reason, everything depends on why you're doing it, then you want a protective shell around it. Because I don't actually want everyone to have to install Ruby and install Python. We were like, oh, this will make the docs easy to change. It's just editing Markdown. Nobody changes the docs because nobody wants to install RBenv and Python and pip and get them running again. So what I did, in this case, I work at Atomist, and we do development automation tools. So I cloned our software delivery machine, and I put it in a Docker container. I installed the requisite versions of Ruby and Python, and then I can run that Docker container on my box. And what happens is, here's Slack. No, this one. Come here. Right, so now when I push to my branch, Atomist triggers my automation, and it says, okay, I know how to do this, and it builds it, and it serves it up, and it gives me an endpoint that I can click on, and okay, now I can test. I can check whether this works without installing Ruby and Python. And then once I push this up into Kubernetes, then anyone on my team will also be able to click on that link in Slack and see my branch, and we can collaborate on it. And they won't even have to install Docker because my software delivery machine in the sky will pick up their change and supply them with a link of, hey, I know how to do this, so you don't have to. This is one way that automation can make bringing in new languages less painful for the team. And then we can actually update our docs. That will be a beautiful day. Yeah, so I'm excited about that, and you can do that with the automative one. But it starts even before any programming. It starts with a README. So Peter Hilton espouses README-driven development, which means just specify what people need to do, and when that gets painful enough, you will write a script. You'll just be like, this is easier to express in Bash than in Markdown. So program the human first. For an example, I didn't show you my, oh well. I think you just missed this. README-driven development by Peter Hilton. All right. So for an example, the README for this end user documentation is pretty good. And it tells you style stuff, blah, blah, blah. Here's how to build and serve. So here's how to install some dependencies, install Python, install pip, and RBenv, and Ruby, and bundle. And then every time you enter the directory, type this, and then you can do this, and then you can serve them. And that's a great place to start. Start with programming the human. The other thing about programming in the language of people is that it's very easy to change. So everyone who uses this README, if it doesn't work for them, they have the responsibility to update it. Every user of this README is also a tester of this README, and every failure they have, they can also fix because it's owned by the team and it can be changed by anyone on the team. Like, let's see, we started with brew install. So I think Sylvan did this first on a Mac, and then James went in and added the Linux piece. So over time, this gets better. And once you understand it really well, then it's easier to automate. Oh, and I should point out that Casey, in his keynote right after lunch today, was talking about how hard automation is. But he was talking about, like, fully automatic kind of stuff. And I'm not talking about that here. I'm talking about the kind of automation that anyone on the team can change. Michael Feathers today made a distinction between tended and untended software. We are not writing a shell script to install on a satellite and launch into space so that it can, I don't know, run its shell commands on Mars. That's not a thing. The sweet spot for automation is when you don't have to anticipate every possible case, every condition, and you don't have to write automated tests because every use is a test and everyone can fix it. And that is so much easier than writing production software, which needs to be untended, which needs to take care of itself and call us really loudly with PagerDuty when it can't take care of itself. Okay, so program the humans first. And speaking of READMEs, the next section here is about the language system API. So when you bring in a language, it's like bringing in a new team member. And that team member needs to be able to communicate with the rest of the organization. Chad Fowler and Nathan Harold at Wunderlist, they established a team where it's microservices, and you can write your service in any language that you want, but there's a list of things that you need to conform to. You need to fit in with the existing logging and monitoring, and the other apps need to have a standard way of communicating with you. So there's some sort of compatibility and friendliness. So here, this language API is implemented just as a README, and that's a little big. There we go. It should include things like the story of the language. Why is this language in use in this organization, and when should I use it, and who can I ask about it, and the purpose, and how do I learn how to use this? But then there's a whole ton of how do I's under development. When you first set up a language, for instance, you don't know how much you know. And other people don't know that, and they need it in the README. And the easier you make it for them to get set up, the more of those pink people in the middle will convert to your language because it'll be easy to use it. In particular, I think the setup part of the change it is a really sweet spot for automation because it changes incentives in the org. It's really hard to write your own README though, because when you set it up for the first time, you don't remember everything you did, and you probably backed out half the things you did anyway. So this pretty much falls on the second person to set up, to write the README, and it falls on every other person to update it. But even better is scripts, because the easier you make setup, the more people will do it, and it also helps new developers tremendously, and it helps you when your computer is stolen. And I highly recommend setting up a Docker container or something that people can just run and have access to change and build and test, because we learn by changing it. I mean, we can read the software, and yeah, please do tell me where to start on that to try to figure out what the heck is going on in your service. But also, we need to be able to change it. So tell us how to run tests and a REPL and build it, and then run it and release it, and tell me about your process. And this kind of gets into your team has an API, really, to the rest of the organization. I think teams need to vary their process a lot, or as much as they choose, within some boundaries, because the larger organization does need ways to observe and direct the team. All right, so put all of that in your README. Oh, and also tell them how to make one. There's a reason that the current crop of languages, so like Elixir and Elm and Node and Clojure, they all have really fast ways to generate a new project. Because getting started gets people in there. And when you automate project setup, so that people can just try spinning a new one up and playing with it, then it's like if you're on the boat, you've created a current where they can just float down it and get the right thing. So that's another thing that we automated at Atomist is project setup, like copy one project to another one and then change the requisite bits, so you don't have to do the exploration of, oh, which project shall I copy? Which parts of it shall I change? It's just a button push. I even did that for this presentation. So I had a keynote, and I wanted to convert it to PDF and version that and push it up to this GitHub org. So I wrote an Apple script that opens Keynote and exports to PDF, which actually was a huge pain in the ass. And I was like, this is ridiculous. But I am trying to demonstrate relentless automation. And I was very stubborn. And I got it to work. And then once I got it to work, I'm like, okay, now I need to do this for all of them. And I just refused to cut and paste. In this case, I refused to cut and paste 3 times anyway. I'll totally cut and paste once. But I wanted all my keynotes, I think there are 3 for this, 3, but there were 4 for this, to have the same build scripts. So I made an Atomist automation, and then I can just type in Slack, see, because I have a Slack team for this GitHub org, for this talk, of course. And I can type create presentation repo, and it asks me for like the name of it, and then it copies one of them, the one that I chose as a seed, and changes the name of the file, and I don't have to create the repo, and it gets them right. And actually, I discovered a couple problems in that. Like one of them, I tried actually kept cutting and pasting, and I forgot the git ignore. So that was a pain. So I went and that just automatically happens with the seed. And then another one, I'm like, oh, I didn't remove the original PDF from the seed project. So then I add that to the automation. One thing I really like about automations is that they, local automations especially, they provide hooks to insert things that you often forget. So like I have a shell script or alias of some sort that will get me a repo from GitHub and then CD into it. And you think, oh, that's 2 commands. Well, it's 3, I have to change directory, but still, that's like nothing, right? Except it starts to come in handy when I get frustrated by, I always forget to npm install on a new node project. And so I had, because I don't git clone blah blah, I type get blah blah and it just does it. I had that place to add the npm install. So I put it in, and now that just happens. So you kind of get to bake your learning into your code the more of your day you have scripted or otherwise automated. That's fun. Okay, back to the language system API. Great. So project creation is another sweet way to entice more people in. Right, so tell people how to read it and how to create it, and this is all available on GitHub for your future reference. Oh, libraries. Tell me which library to use for HTTP calls and how to do it. Tell me how to serialize stuff and all the formats that we use in this organization. Tell me how to access the databases that we use in this organization from this language. How do we do configuration? That's as much policy as anything. And you can link to like docs on the language, but there's this whole interface between the language and where you are that you get to invent. And finally, help. How do we contact the team? This gets into that team API thing too. So maybe it's a channel in Slack where you can post, or a place where you sit and they can come over and talk to you if you're in an office, or a Zoom channel, a perpetual Zoom channel that the team hangs out in if you're remote. Don't forget to tell people that. All right, so if you look at all this and think, oh God, that's so much work, maybe I don't want to introduce a new language at all, then I have succeeded in this talk. Because my objective is like, if you're going to do it consciously. On the other hand, use whatever you want on your own computer. Have fun with that. Nobody even has to know. All right, so having talked about languages, the next one is about the benefits of automation. And this is in Keynote with an SVG that I have borrowed from CodeMania from 2017, because it's got this gorgeous castle that I just love and totally stole. All right, so reasons to automate. I've got 4 reasons and a caution. And right, so people think that maybe automation is about saving time. That, like Joe in his keynote yesterday was like, oh, we spent 4 hours implementing this mail to link and it's only saved for 20 seconds every 2 weeks. That would take 24 years. Okay, that is not the question to ask. The question is, was there ever a time when having that mail to link implemented, instead of cutting and pasting the email address into the mail client, was there ever a time that she did that and sent an email but wouldn't have? It just wouldn't have quite, wasn't quite motivated enough to do the cut and paste. Maybe it's a report an error on this website kind of thing. If you want people to help you out, you've got to make it so easy for them. So the question isn't how much time do I save, it's did it ever incite me to do the right thing where I wouldn't have otherwise, or save me from an error that I would have otherwise hit. I have an alias called PR that it just, I created this because I noticed that when I've made a small change to the code, maybe I fixed an error message or updated a comment or something little that really should be separate, but I just want to lump it in with something bigger because it seems like too much work to create a PR for that. Well, I made creating a PR really easy. So it just like you could PR branch name commit message, and then it makes a commit and it pushes it to GitHub on the branch, and it opens my browser to the pull request. And so then I can just type the reason and hit go. And I make more pull requests because of this. And that is a positive, constructive behavior for my team. Therefore, this automation is useful. It also saves my attention because I don't have to think about, well, do I need to make a commit? Where am I now? Where am I trying to get? It would be a tiny little trivial exploration to figure out how to make a pull request. But it saves me thinking about a few things. And that leaves me able to explore more interesting topics. So save time and attention is a way to change behavior. The next reason is safety. This is like I'm forgetting to npm install. Right? That's a small thing. It's a trivial example, but at least it's an example that makes sense. When you have something automated, the difference between like programming for a human in a Readme and programming for a computer is that the computer actually follows the instructions like the same way every time. I think this is why the only real documentation is code, because all human documentation is implemented by humans and we all have a slightly different runtime. Day to day, it's different. Right, so if you really want people to be safe and do the right thing in every situation that you've encoded, automations can help with that. And safety doesn't just mean falling down and tripping and hurting yourself. It means safety from disasters of all sizes, from going out of business to getting really frustrated. Dang it, NPM, why don't you install for me? Next one is even higher level. Legibility, and this is a strange word that I learned from the book Seeing Like a State by James C. Scott. And it's about being able to describe a system in a way that rolls up. So in the Middle Ages, people didn't have last names or addresses, streets didn't have names, just everybody in the village knew everybody, and so there wasn't any need. Until like governments started getting bigger and they wanted to tax people. And so they sent scribes in and people to assign last names and assign street names and house numbers and write down, make people decide who owned what property. And that was not about the people. It wasn't for them. It was for the management, the government, because counts of people and property sizes are things that they can add together. They form a monoid. So then you can add the towns and you can think about your kingdom at a higher level than a bunch of individuals and their nicknames. And we need this in our organizations. Jira sucks, but it has a purpose, okay? People outside of our team really do need some visibility into our team. I mean, Jira is like the Sentry and the Logzio and the Honeycomb. For us, those are giving us visibility into our running software. Management does need visibility into our team. What is taking longer than expected? What is really hard? Do we even still want to go in this direction, or has some new idea come up? They need that. And when you have automation, then you can plug in reporting. You have all those hooks. Whoever controls the automation controls who knows about it when this happens. I have Atomist automations that whenever a push happens, it gets like a copy of the code and I can access what was changed. And so I can spy on particular functions and have it send me a DM whenever somebody changes my favorite piece of code. That kind of thing. And finally, generativity, because we don't get paid to automate our own stuff. We don't get paid to bring in new programming languages. We don't get paid to make other developers' jobs easier. At least That's not the usual interpretation as embodied in the annual performance review. But I think that when we focus on productivity, we destroy ourselves in a lot of ways. We make it a competition when it's not. It's not about productivity, what I personally produce. It's about generativity. It's about what the team can make with me versus without me. And if you think about your work in terms of generativity instead of productivity, then yeah, spending some time smoothing everyone's work out makes a lot of sense. Because if you're just looking for productivity, you'll try to go faster. And that gets you into the hole of a bunch of kludgy code and no way to change it. And changing it is the core of our job. Whereas if I focus on making my whole team's work smoother, then we're going to get faster over time. That's just going to happen. And we'll also get happier because we'll trip over ourselves less. So finally, there was one precaution, and that is watch out for ossification. So our job is not to write code. It's to operate useful software, which means changing. Our job is to change the system we work on, and that's really hard. We have to know it. We have to have a mental model of it in order to change it. So a danger of encoding something in software is if you can't change it, if the only person who understands it has left, then you're stuck with it. And you're stuck with your particular JIRA implementation if nobody wants to update it to accommodate your more current preferred ways of working. And that's dangerous. In this case, you need to really think about, can I fire this team member, this software team member? Can I start working in a new one that's alive in my head because I have a mental model of it and I can change it? It's even worse when your production code gets ossified. That's really painful. But watch out for that because that is a danger of this. In the end, and I added this bit, but I didn't go back to refactor the others to the new coding standard. So it just looks funny in its own font. In the end, it's really about changing behavior. So these are benefits of automation. I have 2 minutes to do the fourth one. The fourth one is in Prezi. So let's see, do I have that open? I thought I did. It probably won't even load in 2 minutes on this network. So I'm just going to tell you about it. It's about levels of risk and impact. Oh, there it is. So the people here represent the number of people who are impacted, the level of impact of this particular change level, and the colors represent the danger, the risk. So if you want to do something on your local box, have fun. And for all of these changes, what you need to think about is what's the worst, along with what you expect to happen, that's obvious. What's the worst that can happen, the best that can happen, and how do we change it? Because that has a huge effect on the risk. So the worst that can happen, you get inconsistent environments with your coworkers, that matters on some team. The best that can happen for a local change is that you learn something and it moves up to the next level. And it's easy to change. Now, at the team level, it's still pretty easy to change. You only have to coordinate with your team members. It's still, if you use it, you test it. If you fail it, you fix it. So you don't have to worry about automated testing. You're writing a program at that point, not like software. I evaluate these things on a scale from shell script to Netflix. And Netflix is some serious software. So my shell script is a little baby program that I have to change its diaper when it poops out. And that's fine. Whereas Netflix is an adult and will only call me if it hits a problem that it's never seen before. And it wants to call me. So there's at least 8 orders of magnitude of effort there. I'm pretty sure Netflix is 100 million times more work than my shell script. Most of us writing business software that is not Netflix are somewhere at the teenager stage of now and then it gets arrested and we have to go pick it up at the police station. And that's fine. That's fine. But we can help. A a lot of growing our software up is making it easier to change, is adding that reversibility that Casey talked about. And we do that with our organization level tools, with our deployment systems and our log aggregators and our monitoring and observability and our version control and Docker and Kubernetes and all of these tools that help us change and mature our software. The biggest scariness is ossification. But also, the org tools should be changing regularly. We should be updating those and keeping them alive so that we can make it easier for the rest of the development team to explore in the business domain instead of struggling through the same problems over and over. Customers, production code, there's some risk there. You actually have to have untended software. And fortunately, with our programming language introduction, we don't have to worry about that every future customer, which is data, which is like bringing in a new database. Oh, that's a really high level of commitment there. It's really hard to get data out. There's a lot of inertia. Okay, so let's go back to the conclusions. And we'll skip ahead. Maybe? Back. There we go. Here's our path so far. We've gotten to levels of risk, and now we're just gonna skip ahead. Because there's a picture that I really want to show you, which is my room on Monday as I finished preparing the art for this talk. So you can see, I have several sets of markers out. I have the crayons and the big pad. I've got my sewing kit. I think that was for Velcro to go with the felt for the little boats and islands and things. And then there's face paint. That was just on top of something. I didn't use that. Yeah, but there's all kinds of mediums that I used for this talk because I found them inspiring. And it got me excited about making the talk. And if that's you with the new programming language, please keep it local. Because this is fine for me and this talk, because you know what? This talk is art, and in 3 minutes, it will be done. And it will never be changed. The video will go onto YouTube, and it will never change. And so no one on my team or future me is going to have to get out the watercolor pencils and the glitter pens and change the art for this talk. Software is never like that. I heard about a piece of software that was done the other day. Yeah, today, by which I mean an hour ago. It is out of production, and they were able to evaluate how much it cost and how much money that it saved the company. I don't think I've even ever heard a story like that before. So done means out of production. Software is like children. We have to parent it and grow it up gradually by investing in it. So don't do this with your production software. Do it locally on your computer, absolutely. You want it to look more like this. This is when I started, and I thought this was going to be just one talk, and I only needed a few sets of markers and the giant piece of paper. Keep your work environment like this to help out the people members of your team. And remember to offload all the dirty work and the irritating work and anything that you actually want to be done in a consistent manner to the software members of your team with automation. The end. Thank you.
Thanks for a great talk, Jessica. I think we got time for a couple questions. If anyone's got the app open and wants to submit questions via the app, we've already got one there. And we might have time for one or two from the trenches also. Someone asks, let's see if I can find that. As a junior dev, I sometimes avoid automation so that I can learn how to do by hand what otherwise people might do automatically. Is that a bad idea?
No, that is totally not a bad idea. As Casey pointed out today, to automate something, and to be fair, he was talking about making it fully automatic, you have to really understand it. So yeah, do it by hand a couple times so you know how to do it. One reason team level automation is safe is because the worst that can happen is it doesn't work and you do it by hand again like you used to. So yes, do it by hand a couple times. If you really want to get good at it, write your own automation for it, but don't inflict that on anyone else. Unless they ask for it, and then totally do. Yeah, so that I agree. That's a good way. It's good if you have time. Choose what you want to learn, and do that by hand.
Okay. Cool. I got a question. I personally had a question, and someone from the audience just asked about the sea turtle in the corner,
cute.
and whether that was part of the potential version of the talk that got cut. Because I really want turtle ops as a thing.
Oh, the part that got cut did not have the sea turtle, but it did have some awesome sea monsters.
Okay. It's a really good sea
Yes,
turtle.
you can find them in one of the PDFs in this GitHub org. If you go to github.com/SAIAPS for software automation in a polyglot stack, you can find all the materials.
Cool. And then there's a really interesting and good question. Someone asks, there must have been so many things you wanted to say in this talk. How did you organize your thoughts and make it flow so well?
So Jim helped today. I practiced in front of him, and honestly, I use Post-its a lot and markers and stuff, and then I talk to people and see what works for them and see what comes out of my mouth, because I'm an external processor and do most of my thinking at people.
Cool. And then I've maybe got one more, and then maybe see if there's anything for the audience. When you are building these sort of mental models, what do you do to ensure the mental model is shared across the team or the organization and not siloed in the automation person or the ops person, right?
Oh, that is a great question. Oh yeah, I have a whole section on mental models that I didn't get to talk about. Your mental model of the system is always incomplete, inconsistent, and out of date, and everyone's is differently incomplete and out of date. And if you have one person who does this, that's dangerous. So I like pairing, but I like mob programming even more. And a little bit of mob programming can go a long way for transferring mental models. And it's fun. Cool. It's a lot less exhausting than pairing, because it's fine if you check your phone. There's other people in the mob. It's fine.
Awesome. Anything else from the trenches, President? Yeah.
This is actually kind of mind-blowing for me, the way that you can make a language inspirational, but because I'm thinking of that in terms of upper management, specifically in the case where upper management says, Ruby's terrible and bad, everything new is in Go. Or do you have any experience taking this and convincing people who are not in tech all day long that, hey, this new language could work, or here's a new tool to solve this existing problem?
So so the question was, do you have experience convincing people who are not in tech? But I'm a little confused.
Like senior management.
Right. Management and the other people around us who are also very important and invested in this project. But your question was, are they trying to make you use the new tool, or are they trying to make you not?
I've seen both.
You've seen both. Okay.
This language is, someone tried to introduce this language is banned. Or, and then actually at the same company, at the same company, years
No, that
later,
makes
it
sense.
was, our old stuff is terrible, new languages, every new thing is going to be in the new language.
So sometimes even management will be like, there's a problem over here. We want to create a division. We want to draw a line. And switching to a new programming language is one way to do that. So really you need to ask, what is our high-level objective, and how will this language help us get there? And often it's a matter of necessary states. That's also later. In order to get our work done, we have a necessary state of the build is working. We have a necessary state of we're able to push changes to production and reverse them. So you really have to argue the business case. Both one is, what can we do in this new language or with this new tool that we couldn't do before? Not just incremental, what are we replacing, but what new capabilities do we get? And the other one is, how is this safer? And safer for being able to continue to change, like safe from ossification. That's a really scary one. But in the end, it's like empathy speaking. You've got to figure out what did they care about that maybe you also care about. Yeah, and also I make something work locally, and then when I can show people, I'm actually showing them something useful. So start at the small level that's safe, and then work up to the levels where you have to get permission. Thank you.
Let's have another round of applause for Jessica. Thank you so much.